Memphis, Tennessee, a city built on the banks of the Mississippi River, a city that gave the world the blues, gave it barbecue, gave it a sound that vibrated through the bones of American music for over 100 years, a city that loved its own with a fierce and unforgiving pride. But Memphis has always had a shadow side, a side that lives in the spaces between the neon lights and the river mist, a side that knows how debts get settled when the courts move too slow and patience runs out. Damon Wells knew both sides of Memphis. He had grown up in Orange Mound, one of the oldest African-American neighborhoods in the country, where his mother raised him on faith, on hard work, and on the unshakable belief that talent was the only real ticket out of a hard life. He was right. 6'11", 270 pounds of pure athleticism, hands so large he could palm a basketball at the age of 14. He made it out. 13 seasons in the NBA, arenas full of strangers chanting his name, $14 million in career earnings, a life that looked, from the outside, like everything a kid from Orange Mound was supposed to dream about. But in the summer of 2010, Damon Wells drove out to a stretch of road on the edge of Shelby County and was never seen alive again. What happened in those woods and who put him there is a story about greed, about betrayal, about the particular cruelty of being destroyed by someone who once stood across from you and promised to love you for the rest of their life. This is blood money.
His name was Gerald Hutchins, 53 years old, a postal worker who ran the same 3-mile loop every morning before his shift started, rain or shine, summer or winter, hot or cold. He would later tell investigators that he had almost turned back that morning, that the heat was already suffocating before sunrise, that the humidity felt like wearing a soaking wet coat. He did not turn back, and at exactly 6:14 in the morning, Gerald Hutchins rounded a bend in his route and stopped moving entirely. The body of Damon Wells lay face down in the weeds 40 yards off the road. One arm was stretched out in front of him, fingers slightly curled in the dirt, as though in his very last moment he had been reaching for something just beyond his grasp. His gray t-shirt was soaked dark across the back and shoulders. The morning dew still clung to the weeds around him. Gerald Hutchins called 911 at 6:16 a.m. He stayed on the line until the first cruiser arrived. He would tell investigators that he could not bring himself to get any closer, that something about the absolute stillness of the body had nailed him to the road and would not let him move. The medical examiner counted 8 gunshot wounds, 8 entry points. The angles of entry suggested that the victim had been moving, running when the shots were fired. There were no shell casings anywhere within a 100-yard perimeter. No phone, no wallet, no keys, no evidence of a struggle at the road, which meant Damon Wells had gone into those woods on foot and had been shot while trying to get back out. Whoever had done this had come prepared, had cleaned up in the dark before they left, had been calm and deliberate enough to police their brass from the ground of a pitch-black Tennessee forest after shooting a man 8 times. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was not a crime of passion in the heat of a terrible moment. This was an execution. And somewhere in Memphis, the person who had ordered it was waking up to a perfectly ordinary morning. Detective Marcus Cole had been with Memphis PD for 22 years, 14 of those in homicide. In that time, he had worked cases that most people spend their entire lives being protected from: the intimate violence of a city, the specific ways human beings find to destroy each other over money, pride, and love that is curdled into something else entirely. His partner, Detective Yvonne Parrish, had worked with him for 6 years. She described him, when asked, as the most patient man she had ever met, in a way that occasionally frightened her. Cole had known who Damon Wells was the way most people in Memphis knew, not personally, but the way a city knows its own, with a mixture of pride and ownership, the feeling that someone from here had gone out and proven something about the place they came from. He had not expected to be standing over his body on a Tuesday morning. He spent 40 minutes at the scene, walked the perimeter of the tape twice, noted the angle of morning light and where it would have been coming from at the time of the murder, which, based on body temperature, the examiner placed between midnight and 2 a.m. He noted how far the body was from the road, far enough that a passing car would never see it, close enough that someone who knew exactly where to look could find it in the dark. He got back in his Crown Victoria and drove directly to the department, because there was something he needed to hear. The 911 call had come in at 12:47 a.m. The operator who received it dispatched a unit immediately. But Callis Road was long and dark, and the woods on either side covered hundreds of acres. The responding officers had found nothing. Now, for the first time, Cole listened to it. "Hello? Hello? I need somebody out here. I'm out past Callis Road, I think. I'm in the... Please, they're coming. Please send somebody." A sound in the background. Something cracking. Then Damon's voice drops to almost nothing. "Please, I got kids. I got 6 kids. Please, somebody." He played it 7 times. On the 5th listen, he turned the volume all the way up and leaned in close to the speaker. And buried underneath the wind, underneath the cricket sounds, underneath Damon's terrified breathing, barely audible, barely there at all, was something else. A voice. Not Damon's voice. Calm, low, speaking to someone nearby. The words were impossible to make out completely, but the register was unmistakable. The voice belonged to a woman. "They're coming," Damon had said. Not "he's coming," not "I think someone's out here." They, plural, known, expected. Damon Wells had known what was happening to him. He had known who was behind it. And in those 4 minutes of silence, while a 911 operator held an open line and waited for an answer that would never come, someone had taken that knowledge out of the world forever. Cole picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He drank it anyway.
Serena Wells had been married to Damon for 11 years. Together they had 6 children, 4 daughters and 2 sons, ranging from 4 to 14 years old. She was 41, educated, composed. When Damon was murdered, she played the role of grieving widow with a composure that impressed everyone who witnessed it. Perhaps too impressive. "Mrs. Wells, we are so sorry for your loss. We just have a few questions about the days before Damon disappeared, if you feel up to talking. Of course, anything I can do to help find who did this to him. When did you last speak with Damon?" 4 days before they found him. He called to speak with the children. We had been limiting our communication to matters related to the children and the divorce settlement. Things between us were tense, but civil. Tense how? Financial disagreements, questions about custody going forward, nothing I would describe as out of the ordinary for a divorce, nothing that would explain... She pauses, looks down briefly. Nothing that would explain this. Do you know of anyone who might have wanted to harm Damon? Any threats he had received? Any serious disputes? Damon was a public figure for a long time. Public figures attract people who don't wish them well, but no one specific, no one I could point to and say, that person. I genuinely cannot think of who would want him dead. She didn't cry, not once in 45 minutes. I know. Some people just handle grief differently. Some people do. He started the car and pulled away from the curb, said nothing else the entire drive back to the department. But he had already drawn a line in his mind between Serena Wells's perfectly folded hands and the two circled words on his legal pad. The financial picture that emerged over the following 3 weeks was meticulous, deliberate, and, Cole would later say, almost breathtaking in its cold-blooded calculation. Damon Wells's estate at the time of his death was valued at approximately $14 million. Career earnings, endorsement income, real estate holdings across Memphis and Atlanta, investment accounts. Under Tennessee law, Serena Wells was entitled to a significant portion of that in the pending divorce settlement. Their attorneys had been in negotiations for months. Neither side was close to an agreement. But 8 months before Damon's murder, Serena had done something that Cole kept returning to. She had quietly, through their shared financial advisor, increased the value of Damon's life insurance policy, added herself as sole primary beneficiary, raised the payout from $1 million to $1.4 million. The math, once you saw it, was not complicated. If the divorce settled in court, Serena walked away with perhaps $5 or $6 million, a life-changing sum, but subject to negotiation, to legal delays, to whatever a judge decided on any given morning. If Damon died before the settlement was finalized, while they were still technically married, Serena collected the insurance immediately and stood to argue for a larger share of jointly held assets as a surviving co-owner. Dead, Damon Wells was worth significantly more to Serena than he was alive and fighting her in court. She needed him gone before that settlement was signed. The minute a judge finalizes a divorce decree, her leverage over the estate changes completely. But if he dies while they're still married, everything shifts in her direction. And she modified that policy 8 months out, far enough back that nobody looks at it immediately, far enough out that it doesn't scream premeditation on the surface, but close enough that she had already made the decision. She had already decided what she was going to do. She was just building the architecture around it. Cole walks to the whiteboard, draws a line between Serena's photograph and the dollar figure, circles it, then draws another line from Serena's name going outward into blank, empty space on the board. She didn't pull those triggers herself. She needed someone she trusted, someone she could use, and then someone she could point away from herself if it ever unraveled. Looks at the blank space on the board. So who did she go to? His name was Raymond Cage, 38 years old, no steady employment, a weapons charge in 2004 that had been dropped on a procedural technicality, 2 misdemeanor theft convictions that had resulted in probation, the kind of record that said a man knew how to live in the gray areas, close enough to the line to be useful, far enough from it to stay free. He had been Serena Wells's secret for 14 months. 6 confirmed meetings in the 30 days before Damon disappeared. 6, and this exchange at the gas station. What's the date on that footage? 4 days before they found the body. She paid him. Right there on a gas station camera. She actually paid him on camera. The footage shows an exchange. It doesn't tell us what changed hands. Then we pull his financial records and find the money. We find the account. We trace it back to her. It took another week, but they found it. A prepaid card registered to a barber shop on Summer Avenue, a place where Raymond Cage cashed checks 3 times a week. A series of cash deposits made to that card from a shell company, a small LLC registered to a trust that, traced back through 2 layers of paperwork, connected directly to Serena Wells. $50,000, deposited in 3 installments over 40 days. The first payment had been made 6 weeks before Damon disappeared. The final payment, 4 days before his body was found in the woods on Callis Road. And now we arrive at the part of this story that is hardest to tell, because what happened next was not a dramatic breakthrough, was not a smoking gun, was not a moment where justice moved swiftly and powerfully and gave a dead man's family what they deserved. What happened next was nothing. The evidence Cole had was compelling but circumstantial. Surveillance footage of two people meeting does not prove a murder conspiracy. A financial trail connecting Serena Wells to Raymond Cage does not prove she hired him to kill anyone. Without a witness willing to testify, without a confession, without something that put the plan explicitly on record, it was a strong theory and nothing more. Raymond Cage was interviewed twice. Both times he sat calmly, answered with monosyllables, and exercised every right available to him. He had been around long enough to know exactly how these conversations worked. Serena Wells hired one of Memphis's most prominent defense attorneys, issued a statement expressing her full cooperation with the investigation, and then, quietly, gradually, stopped cooperating. 3 years passed. The national news cycle had moved on after a few weeks, the way it always does, toward the next story, the next tragedy, the next set of people whose worst moment became someone else's morning commute reading. But Damon Wells's mother, Carolyn, did not move on. She attended every city council meeting, every press conference, every public event where someone with power might be in the room. She held a photograph of her son in his NBA uniform, and she asked, over and over, with the quiet, immovable dignity of a woman who refuses to be ignored, "Why is no one answering for this? Why does my son not have justice? Why does the truth not matter here?" Cole never stopped working the case. He worked it in the margins of other investigations, in early morning hours before the department filled up. He pulled the 911 call and listened to it again every few weeks, the way you return to a problem you cannot solve, but cannot walk away from either. Then, in the winter of 2013, his personal cell phone lit up on his nightstand at 2:17 in the morning. The anonymous text message read, "Ask Serena who she was calling the night Damon went into those woods. Then ask her about a man named Deshaun." Cole was out of bed in 30 seconds. His name was Deshaun Mobley, 29 years old at the time of Damon's murder, a childhood friend of Raymond Cage's who grew up 2 streets over in North Memphis. Minor drug convictions, a stint in county jail. After that, nothing on record. The kind of disappearance from the system that means a man turned his life around or learned to be very careful. Cole and Parrish spent 6 days building a picture of Deshaun Mobley from nothing, interviewing people in his neighborhood, cross-referencing his known associates with Cage's, tracing his movements in the summer of 2010. What they pieced together was this: Raymond Cage had not gone into those woods alone. He had brought Deshaun Mobley with him. Deshaun fired first, Raymond fired after. Together, in the pitch-black Tennessee night, they had shot Damon Wells 8 times and walked back to a waiting car and driven toward the city lights and left him there in the tall grass, reaching for something he would never reach. They had split the $50,000 down the middle, $25,000 each, for a man's life, for 6 children's father. $25,000. You could spend that on a used car, a down payment on a house, a year of college tuition. Damon Wells had stood in NBA arenas and played in front of 20,000 people and earned $14 million over 13 seasons. And someone had decided his life was worth $25,000. Cole sat with that number for a very long time.
Raymond Cage had been brought in on a weapons violation, a technicality Cole had been holding in reserve for exactly this moment. It gave them 48 hours without formally charging him with anything connected to Damon Wells. 48 hours to see if 4 years of carrying this secret had made Raymond Cage tired.
"Raymond, I'm not going to waste your time pretending I'm here about the weapons charge. We both know why you're in this room. What I want you to think about, really think about, is where you are right now versus where Serena Wells is right now. She's in that house in East Memphis. She's been collecting Damon's estate for 4 years. Her children go to private school. She drives a $60,000 vehicle. She has moved on with her life in every way that matters. And you are sitting in this room, about to go down for all of it, while she lives off money that only exists because of what you did for her. I want to ask you something honestly, Raymond. Do you think she chose you because she respected you, or because she thought you were the kind of man who could be used and then conveniently forgotten? I want a lawyer. That's your right. I respect that. But think about what I said tonight, Raymond. Think about it hard. Cole walked out of the room. 2 days later, Raymond Cage's attorney called the district attorney's office with a proposition. Raymond Cage was ready to talk. The deal Raymond Cage negotiated was straightforward: full cooperation, complete testimony against Serena Wells and Deshaun Mobley. In exchange, a reduced sentence that would make him eligible for parole consideration rather than spending the rest of his natural life behind bars. He talked for 4 hours. Serena approached me in the spring, about 3 months before it happened. She laid it out very clearly. She said Damon had to be gone before the divorce settled. She said she would lose too much in court. She said if he was gone before the papers were signed, she would collect on the insurance and the estate, and she would take care of me after. I said nobody would ever connect it to her. She said she was too clean, too careful. She said she had already thought through every piece of it, and all I needed to do was handle my end. And the night of the murder, walk us through exactly what happened. Damon had gone out that night to meet somebody. We followed him from a distance. When he got out of his car on Callis Road, we came up through the tree line. He heard us. He ran. He got his phone out somehow. I didn't know he'd made a call until later. Deshaun fired first. He didn't go down easy. He kept running. He was a big man. That's all I'll say about that part. 8 shots, 4 minutes and 11 seconds on an open phone line. A man in the dark, begging a stranger to send somebody. Anybody. And back in her East Memphis home, Serena Wells had gone to sleep that night, not knowing, or perhaps not caring, exactly how the details had played out in those woods. She had simply waited for morning. It took 3 more years after Raymond Cage's confession for prosecutors to build a case strong enough to move forward. They needed to corroborate Cage's testimony with independent evidence. They needed to close every gap. They needed to make the case airtight because Serena Wells had resources, had attorneys, and had already demonstrated that she was not someone who made obvious mistakes. On a morning in 2017, nearly 7 years after Damon Wells was found in the woods on Callis Road, 3 unmarked police vehicles rolled silently down a residential street in East Memphis before the sun came up. Serena Wells, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the death of Damon Antonio Wells. You have the right to stay silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. She did not cry. She did not speak. She walked to the police vehicle without being guided and sat with the stillness of someone who had made their peace with this moment long before it arrived. Her composure, which once investigators questioned whether she could possibly be guilty of something this terrible, now read for exactly what it was: the coldness of a woman who had made her decision years ago and had simply been waiting for the consequences to find her. The trial of Serena Wells lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution laid out a meticulous, methodical case. Financial records, the modified insurance policy, surveillance footage, phone records placing Serena in contact with Raymond Cage over 50 times in the months before the murder. Cage's full testimony delivered from the witness stand, and the corroborating testimony of 3 additional witnesses who had been interviewed in the years since. Serena's defense argued that Raymond Cage was a convicted criminal with every incentive to fabricate a story, that the financial evidence was circumstantial, that a grieving mother and widow was being railroaded by a prosecution that never had a better suspect and had decided she was the answer. The defense was thorough. The defense was professional. But then the prosecution stood up on the morning of the trial's 12th day, walked to the center of the courtroom, looked at the jury, and pressed play. "Hello? Please, I need somebody. I'm in the woods off Callis Road. They're coming. Please send somebody. I got kids. I got 6 kids. Please."
That recording did what no exhibit, no cross-examination, no closing argument could do. It put Damon Wells back in that courtroom. It made his voice fill the same air as the woman who had ordered his death. It reminded every person in that room that behind all the financial documents and legal arguments and courtroom procedure was a human being, a father who had spent his last living moments running through the dark, begging someone to save him, begging someone to think about his 6 children. The jury deliberated for 13 hours. When the jury returned, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the ceiling fans rotating overhead. We, the jury, in the case of the state of Tennessee versus Serena Danielle Wells, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the 1st degree, find the defendant guilty. Today, justice was delivered for Damon Wells, for his children, for his mother Carolyn, who never stopped fighting for her son's name, for this city. Let this verdict be a clear and unambiguous message that no amount of money, no amount of planning, no amount of cold calculation will bury the truth forever. It never does. It never will. Serena Wells was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Raymond Cage received a reduced sentence of 30 years in exchange for his cooperation. Deshaun Mobley was convicted separately and also received life. Damon Wells's 6 children were raised by their grandmother, Carolyn. At the time of his murder, the youngest was 4 years old. 2 years after the trial, Detective Cole retired. At his retirement party, someone asked him which case had stayed with him the longest. He didn't answer right away. He picked up his drink. He looked out a window for a moment, and then he said, "The ones where somebody called for help, and the help didn't get there in time. Those are the ones you carry every single day. Those are the ones that never really close, not in court, not in your chest. You just learn to carry them quieter." Damon Wells never got to see his youngest child start school. He never got to watch his oldest walk across a graduation stage. He never got to sit courtside at an NBA game and watch the sport he loved from the other side. He never got to grow old. He got 8 bullets and 4 minutes of silence on an open phone line in the Tennessee woods, and a mother who spent 8 years standing at podiums holding his photograph and refusing to let the world forget his name. The people who killed him had believed that money was a wall, that if you built the financial architecture carefully enough, the shell companies, the modified insurance policies, the prepaid cards, the shell accounts, you could put a wall between yourself and what you had done and simply walk away. They were wrong. The truth does not care about your architecture. The truth is patient in a way that human beings rarely are. It waits in the grass. It waits in case files. It waits in the memory of a detective who cannot stop pressing play on a recording he has heard 100 times. And eventually, not always, not as often as it should, but sometimes, eventually, it finds its way into a courtroom, into a microphone, into a verdict that echoes off the walls of a courthouse in a city that loved a man and deserved to know the truth about how he died. Blood money always costs more than the price agreed upon. Always.